Hello, Blazers. Welcome to UAB Green and Told. This is where we share the stories that make our UAB community so special, stories of resilience, innovation, and connection. Welcome to episode 171 of UAB Green and Told, originally released Monday, March 9th, 2026. Want to catch up on past episodes of UAB's most listened to podcast? Visit alumni.uab.edu/greenandtold or find us on Spotify and the Apple Podcast app. And while you're there, leave a written review so more Blazers can discover us. I'm Greg Berry, a UAB alum and Director of Communications in the Office of Alumni Affairs. Imagine a little girl surrounded by books and art, dreaming in colors and rhymes. That girl grew into today's guest, Ashley Jones, a poet whose voice carries the weight of history and the warmth of her home. As she'll share, before poetry became her calling, it was a lifeline, a way to feel strong when the world felt heavy.
When I recited the poem, I felt everything that I was wrestling with just melt away from me. I felt powerful. I felt connected to myself.
Fast forward to high school, when a single campus tour shifted her perspective. It wasn't just about college. It was about possibility.
It kind of showed me, okay, I can have an elevated world-class education right here in Birmingham, and it could prepare me for whatever I want to do next.
But even with opportunity, there was still the question of voice. How do you write like yourself when the world expects you to sound like someone else?
At the end of undergrad, I really understood I can just be myself on the page. I don't have to try to sound like a poet. I can sound like me.
Crayons scattered like confetti, books rising like monuments, and a home pulsing with creativity. That was the rhythm of Ashley Jones's childhood in Birmingham. At Epic Elementary, she turned reading into writing and writing into wonder. So let's wander into that world where imagination wasn't just encouraged, it was inevitable.
I was a weird kid. Yeah, I'm a weird adult too, so it makes sense. But I was just really, an artsy kind of kid. My family was really into the arts. And so as children, we were always making things and reading, going to the library, playing pretend. So as a kid, I was just like full of wonder and joy. I was singing songs all the time, making up stories, playing with dolls. I was a happy kid, but, I was clearly an artist from the beginning. So a little weird.
You mentioned that your whole family was into the arts and your parents. What was it about the arts that drew them that way?
It's weird. Neither of my parents were practicing artists like for a living. My dad, he was a fire chief, but he could draw like photorealistic portraits with pencil. And he says one day when he was a kid, he just decided he wanted to draw Mickey Mouse. And so he did. And he was great. So he kept doing art throughout his adult life as well. My mom, I think in another life would have been a writer. She was my first reader for most of my life. And she always gave us the best feedback. When you wrote something or made a piece of art, she was going to tell you the truth. Some people's moms will not tell the truth. She always told us the truth. So I don't know how they came to it. I think it just was in them, but they passed it on to us.
You had to appreciate your mom telling you the truth instead of being the normal mom that's like, oh, yeah, that's beautiful, dear.
Yeah. I mean, she's a nice mom, make no mistake. But I think for her, showing love means telling the truth, being honest with your child. My mom knew what potential we had, and so she wanted to make sure we were doing our best. But also it was really helpful as an artist and really just as a human to get used to the fact that everything you do is not perfect, and that there are ways to improve, but also there are ways to see maybe this is not what I need to be doing. You know what I mean? Like in my dreams, I'm a famous singer. I can't sing very well. So I needed somebody to say, hey, maybe not that, maybe something else.
You may not be able to sing, but you can definitely write. And poetry, it started early for you in grade school.
It did, yeah. So as I said, I was always into writing. I actually thought I was going to be a mystery novelist when I was really little, like maybe 5 years old. And the school that I went to Epic Elementary, which is literally right next to where I am now.
Yeah.
And back then we had to just like make books every year. That was an assignment every single year to create a story, and we would get it laminated. It was wonderful. It was cute. But when I was 7 years old is when I discovered that poetry was the thing I actually wanted to do. I had been going through sort of some self-esteem issues. When I started school at 5, I experienced discrimination and racism for the first time. And that kind of took me on a mental journey. And it was, in conflict about who I was and how to, rationalize all these things my parents taught me about how we should be proud of who we are. We should be proud of our history and that everyone is special, everyone's important with what happened, somebody treating me badly because of my race. I found this book in the library called Honey, I Love and Other Love Poems by Eloise Greenfield. And that book just totally changed my life. It's a book of children's poetry. It's illustrated, and Eloise Greenfield was a Black woman, and so the children are Black. They have like afros. It was written in the 70s. But there's all types of emotions that they experience, and there's even history. And so it just kind of reframed my thinking so that I understood, for one, when people are discriminatory towards us, that's a problem they have. It's not something that's wrong with us. But also it showed me that I could feel every emotion and still end up with pride in being who I am. So I recited a poem from that book. The poem is called Harriet Tubman. I used to be super shy, hated speaking in front of people. And when I recited the poem, I felt everything that I was wrestling with just melt away from me. I felt powerful. I felt connected to myself. And I knew I wanted to keep doing that thing. So I started writing poetry and I have not stopped.
Why that poem, Harriet Tubman? What drew you to that one specifically?
There's a certain rhythm to the poem, just on a language level. It was fascinating to me. I mentioned I wish I was a singer. Since I cannot sing, I just use poetry, with certain rhythm. So the poem starts, Harriet Tubman didn't take no stuff, wasn't scared of nothing neither, didn't come in this world to be no slave and wasn't going to stay one either. And it goes on. And like sort of the kind of swinging nature of the words just made me feel excited. It was outside of the very like tight-cornered, rigid, perfect English that I was using as a kid. And it just made me feel like a song, was inside me. But also the history was really fascinating to me. I've always been interested in history. And to just think about Harriet Tubman as this superhero figure who was a real person, too.
Yep.
And to know that I'm in lineage with someone like her, it just made me feel something that I hadn't felt before. Like, I think I finally understood why my parents were so proud to be Black people and why they told me and my siblings, you have to love who you are. It's a good thing to be who you are. And I think just that moment, I felt like maybe I am somebody too.
Did you understand what that poem was all about at that young age, or did it take a while even after you really started and delving down your own writing for poetry?
I think I understood what a 7-year-old could understand.
Sure.
Something I always say when talking about poetry, because so many people are like, oh, I hate poetry, I don't understand it. I think we have to know that there's different things we can get from the piece, and we'll get what we need each time we go back to a piece. So as a kid, I remember, first of all, just feeling excited to know more Black history. And I couldn't conceptualize literally what it meant to be enslaved, escape slavery, go back, get other people. Like that, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around, honestly. But I knew at least that this was a heroic act, and it was something that I could kind of puff my chest out and say, well, Harriet Tubman did this. She's a Black woman. I'm Black too. It could make me feel, just proud. And I didn't understand, all the intricacies of poetic form and rhyme and all of that. These are things that I've, learned as time has gone on. But I really think it was just the visceral connection. And that's what I've tried not to let go of throughout my life. I think poetry and art in general is supposed to make us feel something. And that feeling is something I have to keep in mind so that I don't get so caught up in the academicness of it all, because everything can fall apart if you're just being academic, I think, with poetry. So yeah, I don't know that I understood everything, but I understood the feeling. And that was enough at that time.
Do you remember your personal poem that really changed the trajectory of your life's journey?
Oh gosh. So I wish I still had this notebook. I used to carry around a composition notebook when I was a little kid, because I was really obsessed with Harriet the Spy. And so I carried around the notebook and I would spy on my family because, as I said before, I'm a little weird, but you got to be to survive, I think, in this world. But in that book is when I like that the day that I recited the poem, I went home and I started writing poems in that notebook. I remember just generally what the poems were about. They were very angsty. I think I was born a poet, so I already had poetic angst, trying to understand the world and people in it. But I do remember one poem that like literally caused something to happen,
Yeah.
which was a poem called Autumn Morning that I wrote in sixth grade. I went to WJ Christian Middle School for 1 year. And during that year, I wrote this poem for an assignment for my language arts class. And my teacher said, you should apply to ASFA, the School of Fine Arts. And my sister already went there for visual art. And I knew I couldn't do that. So I wasn't really, thinking about going. But she was just like, this is an amazing piece of writing. You have to apply. Took it home. My mom loved it. I think she hung it up in the house. And I applied, I got in, and there I went on my way to being a professional writer.
What was it about that poem that teacher saw?
She said the imagery was so elevated. Like we all went outside to describe the morning that we saw. It was, I guess, an exercise in using descriptive language. And everyone saw the same, the sun is out, there's dew on the grass. We all saw the same thing. But I think she recognized that I was seeing a little bit closer. When you're a poet, everyone is seeing the same stuff, but as poets, it's like we have a magnifying glass on the world and we see like the small details. Like instead of just saying the grass is wet, I remember there's some lines about the dew and I described the dew in a particular way. But she could kind of tell that I was doing something beyond what the assignment asked for and that I did it naturally. It just was something I thought to do on my own. I've had that experience as a teacher myself where you see a student turn something in, you're like, there's something else here you need to explore. So that's what she saw in that piece.
That propelled you into AFSA. What's life like as a student there?
Well, it's full of little artists. So like it's never a dull moment. And I did the full 6 years. So I was going to school with high schoolers as a 12-year-old. So that was interesting as well, to be thrust into such a diverse environment, both in age and in every other way.
Yeah.
To see students be so passionate so early, like that was really inspiring to me. It was also high school. So like it was all the things high school is. It was confusing. There were hormones, all of those things. But I think the biggest thing that was helpful to me about going to ASFA was learning that if I wanted to do something with an art form, I had to be disciplined as someone doing a sport, or someone who's really good at math or science. I, as a writer, had to take myself seriously and practice and learn and read and really just hone my skill as much as I could.
How do you practice writing?
Well, you write. You write a lot. While we were in school, we got a lot of like exercises. So the teachers would show us published poems. We'd analyze them. We'd learn about what poetry is or what fiction is or nonfiction. We had to do all the genres as students at ASFA. So you do all the work. You do roundtable critique, which is terrifying when you're a child and when you're an adult. Sometimes everybody gets to read everyone's work and give feedback on it. We had to give readings every single year. So I mentioned earlier, I used to hate speaking in public. I don't hate it anymore because I did it so much that it kind of became second nature to me. So yeah, you practice that way. You read a lot. There's so much reading you need to do as a writer, and all of those things are feeding the writing.
Ultimately, you would choose UAB for undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
Why'd you choose to stay in town?
I'm a practical person, if nothing else. And my parents had 4 kids, and all of us were going to go to college. So when I was a senior, everybody was planning to go off to every far-reaching place. And for a while, I thought, well, in order to measure up, I've got to do the same thing. But as I started touring schools and just looking at what college cost, I was like, I'm not doing this to my parents. Like, this is not the thing for me to do, especially when we have schools right here that I could go to, and I can go away for grad school. But as long as I'm still, the responsibility of my parents, I want to make a smart choice. Mm-hmm. So I toured UAB actually as a junior. Our teacher brought us here actually to the honors house to talk about the honors program. And that's really what hooked me, was the university honors program, because it kind of showed me, okay, I can have an elevated world-class education right here in Birmingham. And it could prepare me for whatever I want to do next. So yeah, I chose to come here, enjoyed my 4 years, and then I moved away afterward.
What was the plan to do next? You opened the door. What do poets do once they graduate? A lot of the times you hear the joke, oh, they're a poet, they're not going to do anything. But
Right.
obviously you've made a career out of this. But what at that time was the plan?
So the plan was always to get a graduate degree.
Okay.
At the time, I thought I was going to go straight through to my PhD. I took a 10-year detour there. I'm in school now, but I did not go right after my MFA. But you want to go get an MFA or go straight to the PhD, depending on where you want to teach and what you want to teach. So I moved to Miami to go to FIU to get my Master's of Fine Arts in Poetry, which in the land of creative writing is a terminal degree. So you can get a professor's job. I went to school, enjoyed my 3 years, moved back hastily because nobody can afford to live in Miami. And I started working at the School of Fine Arts, actually. I didn't go higher ed because it's a treacherous world out there to work in academia. And I wanted a steady job. All my friends were in adjunct purgatory because jobs don't come open very often. And for jobs in creative writing, you have to have a book published already to even be eligible for the job. And we were just finishing school, so my book wasn't yet out. So I worked at ASFA, and it was great. But yeah, basically, poets find a job. So some poets are in jobs that don't seem what you would expect. Like there's poets who are doctors, nurses, lawyers, of course, plenty of poet teachers. All of us wish we were just independently wealthy, or had a benefactor, but it's usually not true. So we have to get a job.
What was your time like at UAB?
It was really fun. I will say I probably overdid it a little bit with the extracurriculars, but that's just who I am. I've always been an overachiever. But I really enjoyed my honors program. I was involved with the Trailblazers, so I gave tours of campus, which was super fun, and also helped my public speaking skills. I edited Aura Literary Arts Review. I also edited my honors program's literary journal. I traveled to conferences. I met a lot of cool people. And most of all, I came back to myself with my writing. As I mentioned, high school was, ASFA, fine arts situation, but it was also high school. So I had some existential crises, as all teenagers do. And I wasn't quite sure what my poetic voice was going to be. But at the end of undergrad, I really understood I can just be myself on the page. I don't have to try to sound like a poet. I can sound like me. So that happened in undergrad, and I really started to zero in on what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Yes, I knew generally I wanted to be a poet, teach stuff, but I knew by the end of my time at UAB that I specifically wanted to teach creative writing and eventually go on to get a PhD. And I wanted to be poet laureate. I wanted to be a public-facing poet who did public poet things.
You wanted to become poet laureate. Most people wouldn't even think about that.
Well, I told you I'm a little weird, so.
And is that why it was a thing for you? Because you're, quote unquote, calling yourself weird?
Well, I think what I mean by weird in this case is that I've just always been very strangely focused.
Sure.
And I've always had big dreams. And that was a dream that I had. I knew that there were these poets that I admired who had served as the United States Poet Laureate. At the time, I didn't actually know we had a state laureate. So I just went straight to, I want to be U.S. Poet Laureate, when I grow up. So it wasn't until I came back after grad school that I was like, oh, wait, there's like levels. I can start, at the state level. But I just wanted to be a poet who was impactful to the world. Like there were so many poets whose work changed my own life. I knew I wanted to be like that. So like Rita Dove was a really important poet to me in high school. And she is someone who has served on this larger scale. Gwendolyn Brooks, there's many to list. But I definitely just wanted to be someone who made a difference in people's lives. And I've learned now that you don't have to be a poet laureate to impact people. I still want to be the U.S. Poet Laureate. But, I've found many other ways to be impactful to people with my writing.
In 2021, you became Alabama's Poet Laureate, the youngest the state has ever seen, the first Black woman the state has ever seen. How does one become poet laureate?
So it's different for every state, but in Alabama, it's a consent-based nominations process. So every 4 years, a group called the Alabama Writers Cooperative, which is the oldest writing group in Alabama, they assemble a committee who will receive nomination packets for the Alabama Poet Laureate. And so to nominate someone, you, a citizen of Alabama, have to ask that person if they want to be nominated.
Okay.
Then you'll assemble the packet, which has, I think, 10 poems, a biography or resume, and letters of support. The applications go to the committee. They read them. They decide who they're going to select as their official selection. And then that selection is brought before the membership of the AWC. And then you're voted in as the official, the poet laureate elect. Then the hardest part is getting on the governor's calendar so you can get commissioned. She's a very busy woman, so it just takes a little coordination. Then you're commissioned, and there you are, serving for 4 years.
Who nominated you?
Oh, gosh. So I don't know how this is going to sound, but I'll say it because it's true. I had a few people to nominate me, members of the poetry community who knew that I was interested and thought that I would do a good job. But it did mean a lot to me that more than one person thought this was a good idea.
How humbling was that to have multiple people nominate you for something that you really wanted to achieve?
It really was incredible to know that people believed in me and they thought I could represent the state well. And you mentioned the historic nature of my appointment. I can't even describe, how that made me feel.
Yeah.
It definitely made me feel scared because I didn't want to let anybody down. But I also felt like everything I had worked for, because I've been working hard at being a writer since I was very young. But to know that everything I'd worked for meant something to other people, and that my community work, because I've tried to be very involved in the community and creating spaces for others, that was also impactful to other people. That really meant a lot to me. And I didn't take it lightly. Just because I'm the one who's named poet laureate doesn't mean I have to forget the whole community, who supported me. So my entire 4 years have been very focused on continuing to uplift the community of poets that we have in the state.
During your 4 years as poet laureate, what things have you done? What have you been able to do?
Well, I've done all the normal stuff, like going to visit libraries, classrooms, do readings, give workshops, all of that. I've continued my work with my nonprofit, the Magic City Poetry Festival, offering free poetry programming for people in the greater Birmingham area and beyond when we have virtual events. And I was able to win a $50,000 fellowship through the Academy of American Poets. And it's an applications process. You have to have a project that you're presenting. And my project was called the Alabama Poetry Delegation. And it was sort of a re-granting program where I, received the funds, and I had an applications process where people would propose a project for their region. I split the state into 5 regions. And the reason I did this is because I didn't want to say, here I am on high, here is what you need, people of Alabama. I knew there were already people working in the state, and those people needed to be the ones to say, here's what we need. We need the funds to create a poetry festival. We need the funds to create a poetry fellowship, et cetera, et cetera. I was able to award grant money to 5 individuals and their partner organizations. And those programs have happened across these 4 years. So, for example, we had a youth festival in the Mobile area, which allowed young people to learn and practice poetry and also hear from local poets. Here in Birmingham, we had a fellowship program with the Alabama River Alliance, and they do the Southern Exposure film series with UAB's Michelle Foreman. And in that film series, they bring in filmmakers from across the country, and the Poet Fellow would be from Birmingham. We've had 3 so far, and that Poet Fellow makes a short film. Just like the other filmmakers make a longer film, they make a shorter film with an original poem about the environment. So yeah, we've had lots of stuff to go on in the state of Alabama. But even more than that, of course, I'm very glad to have been able to get money to give to people. But I feel like I've also helped Alabama feel like a literary destination with work that I've done, for example, with Poetry Magazine, making sure to highlight Alabama poets. And I just hope I've made everyone feel like anything is possible. because I've broken, the race barrier, the age barrier, hopefully people are feeling like I can do anything I want to do as well, no matter what my identity.
How do you become, and do you think you have what it takes to be the U.S. Poet Laureate?
Well, I don't have it right now. I need a little break, but the process for the U.S. Poet Laureate is like mysterious. I don't know who the committee is. I think it's all kind of secret, and they select someone. I don't believe there's a nominations process for that. I think it's like you get plucked out of the shadows or whatever. But what I've been told from another U.S. Poet Laureate is that you just have to make your desires known. And so I've been making my desire known for many, many years now. And also you have to, build up your national profile.
Yeah.
So just make sure you're publishing widely, that you are touring across the country so people know your name, that you're already doing some of that work that a U.S. Poet Laureate does. And as Alabama Poet Laureate, I've been doing the advocacy work for poetry already. So that's what you have to do. And just hope that somebody picks you. So.
And when it comes to publishing, if I'm not mistaken, you've published 3 books at least so far?
I've published 4.
4?
4 poetry books, 1 anthology that I co-edited, and in April, I will publish my first academic book.
How has your poetry changed, your writing changed over the 20, 30 years since being quote unquote discovered?
Yeah, I think in many ways I've come back to how I was as a 7-year-old poet. I'm much more free, like I don't feel pressure to prove anything to anyone. I'm really writing for me. But it took some time, to get there. The change has really been coming back to that feeling of freedom, because, everybody feels pressure. Certainly with your first book, you want to prove that you could do it. And then your second book, you want to prove that you still can do it. And now that I'm, on my 4th poetry book that just came out, and I just feel like I can be who I am. I don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. I've done all the things that I need to do. And I can just be my full self on the page. So the change has really been starting from that level of freedom, not feeling that free, and then coming back to feeling like I can be who I am.
To kind of go back to the beginning of the conversation, Eloise Greenfield's Harriet Tubman had that cadence, had that rhythm that you were drawn to. Do you have a style, or do you just kind of put it on paper and see what develops?
I love having fun on the page. So my style, the only thing that's consistent, I'll say, is that I'm probably going to be doing something with form, whether that's traditional, like I'm writing a sonnet, or making a shape on the page, or in my new book, I have a map poem where it's like streets in Montgomery. But I'm always going to bring it back to that human element. What did I feel? What did I see? Even if the poem is not from my own voice, if it's a historical poem, I have to find my doorway in. And that doorway is the soul, the heart, those human elements. So you're always going to feel connected as a human when you read an Ashley Jones poem. You're probably going to learn something, because I am an educator after all. Can't help but to teach. And you probably will find some sort of secret formal element that you may not have seen at first. The poem may look like the spokes on a wheel, but maybe it's in some crazy form. It's in pentameter or whatever. You're going to find something fun, craft-wise as well.
That's Ashley Jones. She earned her Bachelor of Arts in English from the College of Arts and Sciences and Honors College in 2012. Today, she's a celebrated poet and educator whose journey gives us a great idea of what it means to be a blazer.
Being a blazer has always meant proving people wrong, because people have assumptions, always excelling, being intellectually curious, knowing where you come from, because we're in Birmingham and we know our history. We're proud of our history. And being just open, to any experience, open to meeting new people. I think that's what it means to be a blazer, just to be wide-eyed and excited about the world.
That wraps up this episode of UAB Green and Told. And don't forget, you can listen to past episodes anytime at alumni.uab.edu/green and told on Spotify or the Apple Podcast app. Got a guest suggestion or want to join us for an episode? Drop us an email at greenandtold@uab.edu. And be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram for the latest. Thanks for listening, and as always, go Blazers.